Thoughts aren't facts. Thoughts are generated by the chemistry in your brain, and they're often irrational.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I both know it's not the thoughts you have that make you suffer, it's the thoughts you attach to
Mm-hmm.
that make you suffer. There's one of my favorite days in the book is give your mind a name. I love that day so much. It's like if you can just name it, something that's not your name,
Mm-hmm.
and then watch and talk back.
Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Terry Cole Show. This is a really special episode because I am talking to and interviewing my friend Dr. Daniel Amen. And if you don't know his work, he is the foremost brain health expert probably in the world. And his mission is to end mental illness by creating a revolution in brain health, which I so appreciate. Some of you know I did his show, Scan My Brain. I had my brain scanned. I'm on all these supplements now. But he's just wonderful. He's so wise. And I love this book. Actually, Vic and I have been reading. It's a book with 366 mini essays in it. It's called Change Your Brain Every Day, Simple Daily Practices to Strengthen Your Mind, Memory, Mood, Focus, Energy, Habits, and Relationships. And it's so doable. It's like so accessible. It's literally like a 300-word little passage and then a daily action to take. So I love the format of this book, and I appreciate, there's many of his other books that I've read and that I love as well. But Daniel is different because he has the Amen clinics, 11 locations across the US, and he has the world's largest database of brain scans. So he has 230,000 brain scans. So what I love about his work is that it's so data driven. He's not guessing what's happening in your brain. He actually has data. So anyway, I hope that you find this episode as enjoyable and interesting as I have. I will see you go enjoy. I am so excited to welcome back Doc Amen to the show. Welcome back, Daniel.
Terry, so great to see you again, my friend. Thank you for helping me teach people how they can have a better brain every day.
I am so excited to talk about this book. Vic and I have been reading it. We're doing it the way you're supposed to do it. So let's just start from the beginning before we reveal all about the book. The book is called Change Your Brain Every Day, Simple Daily Practices to Strengthen Your Mind, Memory, Mood, Focus, Energy, Habits, and Relationships. Now, who the hell doesn't want that? We all want that. This is super duper exciting. So why this book, right? Like what inspired you to write this particular book at this moment in time?
I came to realize through the pandemic that brain and mental health are daily practices. So just like physical health, just like spiritual health, you have to do this every day. It's not just when you get depressed. It's not just when you're having a problem in your relationship that you should see someone. This is stuff that they should have taught you in school, but no one ever did. Brain health is more important than English. It's more important than geometry. It's more important than history. It's the foundation for all health and success, because when your brain works right, you work right. When your brain doesn't, you don't. But yet there's no formal education on how do I love and care for my brain? Yet we are living in a shit show. We are living through a time when depression is skyrocketing. You might have seen the study out on teenage girls last week.
Mm-hmm.
It's just horrifying that more than half of them have persistent sadness, that almost a quarter of them have been suicidal with a plan, and 13% of them have tried to kill themselves. This is unlike anything you or I have experienced in our decades of being therapists.
Right.
That this is not okay.
Yeah.
And the way out is not through Lexapro and Xanax and Ambien. That is not the way out. Last year, there were 337 million prescriptions for antidepressants. And we're more depressed than ever. Depression has gone up about 500% since 1988 when Prozac was released. This is not the solution, right? And I'm not opposed to medicine. It's just never the first thing I think about.
Same. Because there's so many other mitigating factors. But what I find so fascinating about your work and why I'm such a fan and how you've converted me to the brain warrior's way of thinking about my brain the same way I think about the rest of my body and my mental wellness, which I have to say, I mean, when I got turned on to your books a couple of years ago, it was a foreign concept. And I remember reading when you had first written about that brain health is mental health. And at first, because I was such, I was so stuck in my therapist ways, I was like, but is it? And then the more I read your work and your studies, and what I love about your work, Daniel, is that it's so data driven. So this is not like, gee, I have an opinion about this. We're actually looking at brain scans. And I remember asking you because you're a frequent flyer on my show, I remember asking you the first time you were on about why, as a psychiatrist, did you start doing brain scans? Like, what was the connection? And you said something that really blew my mind. And this blew open the way that I viewed the brain health and mental health connection. You said, we're the only doctors who never see the organ we're supposedly experts on. So I wanted to brain scan so I could see what was happening on the organ. And I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Anyway, so let's talk about what we've all seen, but you have the data about what happened during the pandemic. And so many people have reached out to you, and you've got your Instagram show that I did, Scan My Brain. You've got so many people coming to you where you are shining light on this. So how I'm experiencing this book is different from other books, and I really, really like the format. So tell us a little bit about the way Change Your Brain Every Day is laid out.
So it's 366 short essays on the most important things I've ever said over the last 40 years as a psychiatrist. And why 366? Well, next year's leap year. And I wanted to be in your head for a year because change takes time. Mm-hmm. And my ultimate goal is to be the little voice in your head that helps you do the right thing. And I always get a kick out of people go, you're the reason I'm out here exercising, or you're the reason I stopped drinking, and I love that. And I just want to be that little voice. If you could spend 5 minutes a day with me in my psychiatrist's office, well, what would I teach you over that year? And there's a lot. There's a lot I've learned and a lot for you to learn. But ultimately, it's really simple. And so every day, it's about a 300-word essay that I write. And then there's an action step. There's like just a simple thing to do, a tiny habit for the day. Like whenever you go to make a decision today, ask yourself, is this good for my brain or bad for it? And if you can answer that with information, the book gives it to you, and love of yourself, love of your family, love of your work, love of your money, then you just start making better decisions. And you and I both know that conflict often comes from somebody's poor decisions, or depression or anxiety often comes from poor decisions. So if you can increase the quality of your decisions, your happiness tends to go up.
What's so beautiful, though, about the way you've laid out this book is that I feel like you've cracked the code on the accessibility piece, because what I find with the clients and with the groups that I run and all the things is that it's very easy for people to be overwhelmed with information, with feeling like I have to change so much or I have to do so much. And I think that part of why I love this, and Vic and I are actually reading one a day. Like we've now, after I got the book, we started we do some stoicism stuff and we do change your brain every day because both of us are really interested in holding on to what we got and keeping what our abilities, because I do think with aging, the whole memory thing that happens that I've noticed way more. And I don't know if it's, and I wonder what your thoughts are on this. I mean, I finally did get COVID like very late in the game, probably the 7th generation of what it was less than a year ago. Is there any evidence that you know of that COVID is impacting people's brains, or is it just aging that?
Oh no, it's totally COVID.
Okay.
I have hundreds of COVID brains, and I have dozens of before and after COVID brains.
Wow.
I had their scan before, they had COVID, I scanned them. COVID acts like an inflammatory bomb that goes off in the brain and can really cause brain fog. So I was on the Kardashian show. Kendall came to see me because after she got COVID, she had terrible brain fog and anxiety like she never had before. And if you look at her brain, it was just like a bomb went off. And so settling it down, omega-3 fatty acids, curcumins, quercetin, sometimes ivermectin. You say that and some people just lose their mind, but it works. And hyperbaric oxygen can just make a huge positive difference. So if you're still struggling, if you noticed, my memory was pretty good and now it's not, absolutely can be COVID. And
That's good to know.
doing the right things to settle that down can be just so helpful for you.
Yes, and because I am taking some of the things that you recommended, because after being on the show, you sent me some. But part of my mindset, once I heard that it was a possibility, I stopped sort of panicking, and I was like, well, let's look at this just like anything else. What positive actions can you take every day to help whatever inflammation or whatever is happening in your mind? But it is a relief to think that there is some causal connection there with COVID, because I was a little bit like, wow, is this like you just hit a certain age and just your memory just goes away? And that's not accurate, right? I mean, I know that that's not what's happening, but there's something about feeling empowered. And what I get from this book is I feel like I'm set up to succeed. I can read 300 words and do a daily action. Like I'm fully capable of doing that. And I don't care how busy anybody is. Anyone can do that and feel like you're winning, as opposed to so much of the time when my clients will think about changing something, the overwhelm is so fast and they just feel like it's too much. It's too much. So reading a 350 word passage and doing one thing a day, that's not too much, I don't think, for anyone. So I really appreciate the way that you've laid it out. And it's interesting. I almost feel like you intuitively laid it out this way. I mean, listen, it makes sense. You have 40 years of work. Okay. But for how overwhelmed many of us have been throughout the pandemic and getting back to quote unquote normal life to the best of our ability, it's that this whole rocking of our foundation is still something that has reverberating an impact. At least I see in my clients, where nobody is like back to normal, right? Nobody's like, oh, okay, I'm back to my pre-pandemic life. Like, no. So what are you seeing in our culture and the research that's out there now that this has increased? Obviously, what you shared at the top, this has increased since the pandemic, the need for this.
So some people thrived during the pandemic because they stopped the crazy busyness in their lives and they actually got to spend more time with their loved ones because they weren't driving to work. So some people thrived during it. Introverts liked it a lot because they didn't get stressed out by the extroverts
Right.
at work. But a lot of people were hurt by the pandemic, by the fear, by the constant death tolls, by the bad food, the isolation. In my mind, the government got an F in how they managed it.
Mm-hmm.
And like children's reading levels now are lower than they've been in 50 years because it's really hard to learn to read on Zoom if you're not in class. So we're going to be mopping this up for decades.
Mm.
And we were already in a bad way before the pandemic. I mean, depression was at epidemic levels before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And in 5 months, it tripled. So it was 8.5% of the population in February of 2020. And by August of 2020, it was almost 30% of the population. But head to head against antidepressants, fish oil has been found to be equally effective.
Amazing.
Head to head against antidepressants, walking like you're late for 45 minutes, 4 times a week, equally effective. Head to head against antidepressants, learning how not to believe every stupid thing you think has been found to be equally effective. So obviously there are days in Change Your Brain Every Day where we teach about the science of exercise, especially coordination exercises, the importance of taking daily omega-3 fatty acids, and there are many days on learning how to not believe everything you think. That thoughts aren't facts. Thoughts are generated by the chemistry in your brain, and they're often irrational.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I both know it's not the thoughts you have that make you suffer, it's the thoughts you attach to
Mm-hmm.
that make you suffer. There's one of my favorite days in the book is give your mind a name. I love that day so much. It's like if you can just name it, something that's not your name,
Mm-hmm.
and then watch and talk back. Like, I don't know if you were good at talking back to your parents when you were a teenager. I was excellent. I was so good at that. But I was 28 years old, and in my psychiatric residency, when I heard my professor say you have to teach your patients not to believe every stupid thing they think, and I'm like, but I believe every stupid thing I think.
Right.
I was just living with this undisciplined mind,
Right.
and I had to learn how to discipline it. And discipline does not mean you have to beat yourself. No, that's not
Mm.
discipline. That's abuse. Discipline is train, it's teach, it's direct,
Mm-hmm.
and disciplining your mind. I mean, it's one of the big things you'll get out of reading this book is you'll come out of it with a disciplined mind. And I love what you say. So many people are afraid of memory loss, especially as they get a bit older. They're like, oh, I'm 60 and my memory's not good. That's normal. I'm like, no, you got bad habits.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain's deteriorating. And that's common, but that's not optimal. It's not what you want. I'm 69 this year, and I've seen way too many 69, 70, 80-year-old brains. I am appropriately concerned, which
Mm.
means I do the right things, right? The older you get, the more serious you need to be because, as we age, our skin falls off our face. And that same process happens in the brain,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to.
Right. And you've got a lot of emphasis on physical wellness and coordination and doing things to move your ass, basically. And what I find is that it is, since the pandemic in particular, that I work out, I would say probably 6 or 7 days a week. I mainly jump on a trampoline and lift weights and hike and do other things outside because I live in the country. But like for sure, 45 minutes, I'm doing something that is raising my heart rate. And what's interesting about it is that it's as much for the dopamine and the strength, like how empowered I feel in my work, my writing, my TV stuff, whatever it is I'm doing. So much of it has to do with how empowered I feel in my body. And if I'm not in good physical shape, right, I'm very committed to working. And now, since you've introduced me to all of this a couple of years ago, we shared a client, I'm at that same level of commitment to following what you're talking about, reading the studies, understanding, getting the book, reading it every day. And there's something, again, so empowering about knowing that, quote unquote, this isn't just the way it is as you age, and that it doesn't have to be a shit show aging. And I'm so aware of that. I have power over what happens in my body. And now, part of what is so beautiful about the work that you do and the books that you put out there and your talks. And I mean, you guys, if you're not following Doc on Instagram, you need to be, because I can't tell you, Daniel, how much I get out of your Instagram stuff. Like, I will fall down a rabbit hole after you just talking about additives in something or whatever it is. But it's all such accessible, valuable information. So I just want to say that I feel like you're one of my favorite people on Instagram and TikTok to follow,
Thank you.
because it's always something that is relevant to me. So throughout the book, I wanted to ask you, you describe different experiences that a lot of your patients have had and people that you have helped throughout. So would you share one of those stories with us now about how brain health improved through your help with people?
Well, one of my favorite stories is Alicia Newman, who is a Canadian Olympic pole vaulter. And
Mm-hmm.
she came to see me a couple of years ago because she's part of Scan My Brain, the series you and I did together.
Mm-hmm.
She had a bad concussion. She fell in a hotel room in a bathtub, slipped, hit her head, lost consciousness, got depressed, and then developed something called Irlen syndrome, which is very common in people who have concussions. She was light sensitive. And when she went to the Olympics, the lights were so bright on her, she couldn't jump. Because to be a pole vaulter, you have to be completely aware of your body in space. And she was depressed and she was negative, and my life is worthless if I don't win an Olympic gold medal. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, we have to work on that thought because that is a toxic thought.
Yeah.
And, we worked to heal her brain. We worked to discipline her mind. And just a couple of weeks ago, she won the world 2023 World Indoor Pole Vaulting Champion. So I'm so
Unbelievable.
proud of her. But you just see how, a world-class athlete can get a concussion, can change the direction of her life. She's got a visual processing problem. So we repair the concussion, we get her visual processing stuff, and then we get her mind going in the right direction. So you think of it like hardware, brain function,
Mm-hmm.
software, how her mind is working,
Mm-hmm.
network connections, her relationships, and her spiritual circle, which is ultimately, why are you doing this? You are not doing this for a gold medal. You are
Right.
doing this because you love it and it allows you to do the next thing. Because if
Mm-hmm.
professional athletes don't know what's next, you and I have both seen this, they get depressed when they retire. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's creating this map, but those four circles that the book is really organized around the biology of brain health and the psychology and the social circle and the spiritual circle. So there are many days on each of those four circles.
Got it. What would you say about, because I know a lot of people who have suffered concussions and there are lasting effects from it. And a lot of them were people, clients who had a concussion in high school and then went on to have these issues, these problems. So what would you say with someone, let's say someone thinks they had a concussion, what is one of the first things they should do?
look at their brain. Because how would we know if there were lasting effects if we never looked? And I scanned somebody recently who's had worldwide fame and then worldwide shame. And then no one knew it was a bad car accident that caused the problem. So once you know, well, then you can rehabilitate it. Hyperbaric oxygen, simple supplements, got to stop drinking and using marijuana. When you see it and avoid things that hurt the brain and do things that help it. I mean, in the book, I talk a lot about the NFL work I've done.
Oh, yeah.
Lots of concussions. I have 350 NFL players. I mean, some cool players like Dick Butkus and Freddie Dryer and Terry Bradshaw. And 80% of my players get better when we put them on a rehabilitation program. How exciting is that? And they've been hit in the head thousands of times. If you asked me, you said, okay, Daniel, what's the single most important thing you've learned from 230,000 scans? Mild traumatic brain injury ruins people's lives. And nobody knows about it because nobody's looked at their brain. And once you look, you can then go to repair it. That's what I get excited about. It's not, oh, you had a brain injury and that's why you act badly. It's like, oh, you have a brain injury and that's why you act badly. Let's fix it.
Right. I think the shame too, there's something about people, you had mentioned someone who came to fame and then came to shame. I think that a lot of times people will have shame around what they can quote unquote no longer do, let's say, or what, they may have a mild brain injury, not realize it, and then be thinking, I'm just losing it, or what's wrong with me. And I feel like especially, and listen, you have 350 NFL, you can tell me if somebody has gotten their way to Daniel Amen, clearly they know whatever happened to their head is a problem, right? Like, you got to try to go see someone who's a brain expert and someone of your stature and someone of your, visibility. But what about the people who don't know, but they feel like something is wrong? Or what about people who just, like the rest of us, are learning about this? What are some daily practices that we can start doing today to help our brain health?
So I worked with BJ Fogg from Stanford. He runs the Persuasive Tech Lab. I worked with him for 6 months on how people change. And we created over 50 tiny habits. So what's the smallest thing you can do today that will make the biggest difference? And the first one, whenever you wake up in the morning, when your feet hit the floor, say, today is going to be a great day. Why? If you don't discipline your mind, for many of the people we see, they just tend to go to the negative. They tend to see what they don't like. And there's an evolutionary reason for that. The people who survived were the ones who woke up afraid of the lion that was going to eat them. And so they woke up, they were afraid, and they're like, protect yourself, protect yourself. Well, the lion's not around. But people still wake up afraid. And so we need to retrain or discipline our mind to look for what's right rather than what's wrong. Today is going to be a great day. And if you have children, go at breakfast, go, hey, why is today going to be a great day? As you go through your day, the most important of all the tiny habits is this one. I used to play a game with my daughter, Chloe. We called it Chloe's game. I'd like, hey, is this good for your brain or bad for it? And if I said blueberries, she would go, are they organic? Because non-organic blueberries hold more pesticides than almost any fruit. So these are the things you're going to learn. And I'm like, well, of course they're organic. She goes, 2 thumbs up, God's candy. It takes 3 seconds. Is this good for my brain or bad for it? If I reach for the alcohol, good for my brain or bad for it? Well, if you read my book, you'll learn it's bad for it.
Mhm.
Marijuana, bad for it. Sugar, bad for it. Nicotine, bad for it. Caffeine, not good. And if you can just answer that, and I spend a lot of time talking about love in the book, that doing the right thing is not because you should do the right thing. It's because you love yourself. It's
Mm.
getting the right mindset around decision making. Too often people go, I can't have this and I can't have that. And I can't do this. How can you have any fun? And
Mm.
so there's actually a day called Who Has More Fun? The person with the good brain or the person with the bad brain? It's the person with the good brain.
Yeah.
Because when you really go, what do I want? And that's one of the days as well, the one page miracle. What do you want? Energy and
Mm.
memory and clarity and focus and connection and purpose. And the marijuana, nicotine, alcohol, sugar, it doesn't help me with any of those things. In fact, it steals from me. So is this good for my brain or bad for it? My favorite of all the tiny habits, the one I never miss, is when I go to bed at night, I go, what went well today? And I literally go on a treasure hunt of what I loved about my day. And I
Mm.
just sort of go hour by hour looking for why
Right.
this
Because
day was special.
what's amazing about those, and I do different versions of those similar habits because it's so important. The first thing I do and the last thing I do, right? Because that's like you are intentionally, consciously planting seeds. And what you're talking about, of course, the negativity bias, where, we remember all the bad crap 5 times more readily than the good stuff. And it's planting this seed of I can be a silver lining detective without being hyper positive, right? Without bypassing what needs my attention, without dealing with hard things. And I think that if we look on social media, you'll have the extremes where you will have some people who have this hyper positivity thing going, and it's like it's not that helpful, right? Where it's not real, it's not real life. And part of what we want and what I want is to have the strength, the durability to focus on what's good even when times are tough as I manage those tough times. So it isn't like bypassing them because of course this is a part of the human condition, but I don't want the tragedies, the traumas, the losses that I've had in my life, the scary things, the cancer, the being held up at gunpoint, the death of young people, all the things that I have experienced and we've all experienced. Those things, I decide, do not define me
Right.
because I'm still really friggin' grateful to be having this trip this time around on planet Earth with friends like you, with my husband, with my chickens, with my geese. Like, there's always something to be grateful for. And yet, I think, especially during the pandemic, it was very easy because there was so much divisiveness that I think for the first time in my life, and I might have talked about this on the Scan My Brain show, I don't know, but I felt a sense of anxiety that I'm not wired that way generally speaking. And that was when I really went into action about changing what I was doing, being so clear that I did not need to be watching the news. I could read the news and not be so activated in fight or flight all the time. Like there was a lot of shifts that I made around simply having that experience of feeling anxiety because so much was out of control. So, and I feel like, many of us are coming, we're coming back around from that experience. But I love, love, love what you're sharing about these very small things that we can do. Start your day. This day is going to be a great day. And do at night, look for what went right, what went well, what was good today. And again, creating neural pathways, I imagine, training our brains to look for the good stuff.
So important. And, just knowing the news is no longer the news.
Yeah.
There are a lot of days in the book, I don't know if you've got to any of them yet, where I imagine if I was an evil ruler and I wanted to create mental illness, what would I do? Because I wanted to put a spotlight on how society is driving mental
Hmm.
illness. And if I was an evil ruler, I'd create Fox and CNN
Yeah.
that focus on what pisses you off, focuses on what scares you, so they can sell you stuff. Because the more they make you angry, and it's just not Fox and CNN, it's the New York Times, it's the Washington Post. I have a friend who did an internship at the Washington Post. She said there's a scoreboard, that a digital scoreboard on what articles get the most hits.
Mm.
And then they go after them over. So if it's anything embarrassing about a Republican, the Washington Post will just lead with it because it gets them attention.
Yeah.
And when you understand that, I mean, one, it should really piss you off.
Hmm.
And then it should cause you to turn it off
Yes.
because it's not the news anymore. It's divisive on purpose to sell you stuff.
Yes. It's manipulation, right? It's manipulation.
We are being manipulated
Yeah.
as a society. And a lot of people saw that during the pandemic and it made them furious. Now, I work really hard to be positive, but you need some anxiety. People who have low levels of anxiety die the earliest from accidents and preventable illnesses.
Mm.
So one of the days is, there are a number of days on the lies of happiness. And one of the lies of happiness is don't worry, be happy. It's like, no, no, no. You need to have appropriate worry so you don't do stupid stuff.
Hmm.
It's funny. I just had an interview where we actually had a debate about positive thinking. And I'm like, I'm not a fan of positive thinking. I'm a fan of accurate thinking with a positive spin because, know the truth. The truth will set you free. This third beer is going to hurt you. Just because it says health food bar on the outside, if you don't read the label, that may have nothing to do with it. May be an early death bar.
Instead of a health bar.
And instead of a health bar. Many of them are.
Daniel, I have to say, I really, this book, you guys, is a game changer. So if you're interested in your brain, the author is Dr. Daniel Amen. It's called Change Your Brain Every Day, Simple Daily Practices to Strengthen Your Mind, Memory, Mood, Focus, Energy, Habits, and Relationships. And Daniel, tell everyone, where can they get this amazing book?
Well, thank you so much. I can get it anywhere. Great books are sold. It is out and everywhere, which makes me super happy.
Yay.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, Target, Walmart. And I'm just so grateful. It's my favorite book. My wife goes, you say that about every book, which is not, it's not true. And the reason it's my favorite one, it contains all of them. So all of the sort of fun, cool, insightful things I've said over the last 40 years, I was able to put into this book. So it's very special to me.
So it's like a best of, right?
Yeah, it's sort of like Springsteen's best songs.
I love it. Well, thank you for being with us. I appreciate you so much and the work that you're doing and your friendship. And I just appreciate you spending all this time with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for helping me spread the message. I adore you.